Welcome to DreamMachine. My name is Arun.
And my name is Patricia.
Hey Patricia, how's things going?
Things are going pretty good. So today we're going to be talking about a movie with epic proportions.
Yeah, and I believe also it's his epic first movie, so I think this is going to have to be a very important one for an epic first movie, if you ask me. So, okay, so shall we get going?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go.
Tra-la-la! Are you worried about impending doom? Those evil villains got you filled with gloom. Don't you fear there's a hero in the sky, the sky, the sky. It's not a bird and it's not a plane, and it's not an egg salad sandwich. It's the waistband warrior. Here is mighty battle cry. Tra-la-la.
So, Captain Underpants is a 2017 American 3D computer-animated superhero comedy drama film based on the children's novel series of the same name. I mean, okay, so I gotta tell a bit of a story here, and it all goes the way back to when I was gonna go back to Florida to meet my lovely Patricia, who is currently co-host of this show.
Hello.
And hey, and so I mean, when I was watching movies on the 9-hour flight that I was on, I was scrolling through them all, and so I basically watched Spider-Man: Homecoming, and then I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, this wasn't good preparation in order to watch this film, because when I first saw Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, I thought, oh hey, this is going to be kind of like Freakazoid, or this is going to be kind of like, some other movie, like The Tick, for example. I thought this was going to be kind of making fun of the superhero genre. I thought it was going to be some fun with that, and so I also pretext with that with this, and I want this to be very important to everybody, because I know that there are some people here who have actually grown up with Captain Underpants, and with that I say, very good, and I'm really glad that he brought some inspiration to you in regards to being a character, but I did not, and so I got a very different perspective of this. And so for me, I mean, the fact that it's first of all called Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, I really thought that the main focus of this was going to be at least I thought the main character of this was going to be Captain Underpants himself, and maybe the guy who obviously turned into Captain Underpants. But not really. It's actually focusing more around our other two characters, George and Harold, in this.
Yeah, so basically, for those who are wondering what is Captain Underpants, Captain Underpants was based off of a book series, as mentioned before, by Dav Pilkey, and it was around from 1997 to 2015, and yeah, it was like a huge popular book series around the time. Like, it was like one of the major children's books that a lot of people really got into, and this was at the time in which when, toilet humor was at its prime with like Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life, so, titles such as like Attack of the Talking Toilets and Wrath of the Wicked Wedgie Woman and The Bionic Booger Boy were, this is what kind of like made kids, thought it was funny in the 90s. And that's why it became like massively popular.
We were the Nickelodeon generation, everybody. Pretty much. So.
Yeah. So the book series, pretty much continued on for at least almost a decade. And I think that maybe they're going to still continue with it, or maybe the one in 2015 with the last one. I'm not sure. But yeah, it was such a popular franchise that they wanted to do a movie based off of it from the very beginning. But Dave was like saying, no, I don't think so. I want to just focus on the books. And I'm not even joking. In the LA Times, of how DreamWorks convinced Dave to say, we want to do a movie based off of your books, is that they were all walking around with underpants with, on top of their pants. And then he just laughed and said, okay, I think you guys can capture the humor of Captain Underpants. And that's how we got it.
Yeah. So, in regards to, me and Patricia take this from two completely different perspectives. So I guess there's one important question I probably have for you, Patricia, and that is this. How faithful is Captain Underpants, the epic first movie, to Captain Underpants itself?
It's more or less pretty faithful. I mean, the story about the two kids hypnotizing the principal for him to be Captain Underpants, it's more or less, the same story. There are some liberties, of course, but for the most part, I mean, that's exactly what you'll be expecting to see in the Captain Underpants books.
Okay, so, I mean, going back to the pretext of what I was talking about before, and that is that I kind of prepared myself for this to kind of be more like, more like Freakazoid, more kind of like, going to be more like, a kind of a parody of kind of like superhero stuff. And we started off, somewhat pretty well, and so we ended up with the origins of Captain Underpants being told to us, which is that he obviously basically is, and they basically just borrowed from Superman. Pretty much, it's like, and unless they're going to tell us, like, oh no, we borrowed from Megamind. It's like, which is like, yeah, they borrowed from Superman. So it's like, a great start off, by the way, to this, and they even go as far as to even parody, the DreamWorks animation, logo at this point, which I know is not very original, I guess, for a DreamWorks film, because a lot of other ones are basically poking fun at the DreamWorks ident for a while, so this is just a continuation of that. But I think the fact that they've given us kind of this like imaginative intro to this, this is all drawn by our two characters, and this is all being told by our two characters. So the kind of like the childhood innocence of all of this, I think, is very evident on the screen. And so, but the problem with that is that I thought, after watching Marvel movies and after thinking, oh hey, this is going to be something a bit different from that, I guess that's probably one of the reasons why I automatically got turned off in the first 30 minutes. And
that's understandable, especially since I don't believe that Captain Underpants was like as popular in the UK compared to America. So you probably didn't really have an understanding of what it was. You probably thought that this is like incredibly weird, when in reality this was like a popular book series for children in the late 90s.
Yeah, but so basically I had to walk away from it because obviously it just felt like I just wasn't in the mood for it at the time. Like it's one of those movies you really have to be kind of in the mood for, I think, with Captain Underpants. When you feel a little silly, when you feel like having a little bit of fun, I feel like, at the time when you're going through a marathon of serious movies, well, not serious movies, but, you catch my drift. When you're going through, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for example, like, that's kind of like where you are at that period of time. You want to be immersed in a world of superheroes, and Captain Underpants doesn't do that. And like, if anything, Captain Underpants would be something if you feel like, you're having like, you've just finished watching a marathon of like Animaniacs, or you're just watching some Tex Avery cartoons. That's what I mean. That's where Captain Underpants, I believe, belongs. In collection of like animation. If you catch my drift. And
it's very wacky. It's very out there. There's a lot of quick gags. So, yeah, it's definitely akin to something like Animaniacs.
Exactly. So, we go to... Then, obviously, we get introduced to the principal, which is Principal Krupp. And, he's basically a miserable little bastard.
He is very ruthless.
And basically, he is basically the dictator of the school. Pretty much. He is the most, he is every kid's nightmare of a principal, pretty much. But, here's the thing about this as well. I mean, it's not just from a kid's perspective, because I think, even adults could even relate to this principal. In a way, like, it's like, when they go to school, I don't know if this is giving clever social commentary or not, or if it's just kind of maybe being a bit lazy about it, but it does poke quite a lot at the public school system. In a way, like, teachers are low paid, I guess kids can't understand why, certain things don't happen in public schools and why they have to cut back on certain things, like art, for example, like, music and things like that. That's a real thing that's happening. I'm sorry to turn this into, political commentary rather than, a review of Captain Underpants, but, it does kind of point out some things that are happening in the United States. And so, but here's the thing about this. I don't know whether this is clever social commentary on that, or whether I don't know if it's just there for a lazy kind of like jab. That I can't. I mean, because I'm not fully immersed in entirely what's going on in the American school system, so you have to forgive me about that. But I don't know if it's clever, or if I don't know if it's just lazy. I don't know. So I think you're going to have to help me a bit more on that, Patricia, than than I can.
So basically that the kids are constantly making fun of the teachers. They're pulling pranks, and the most pranks that they pull off of the most is their principal. And the reason why is because they feel that the teachers are going against them, and they feel like they need to be able to express their creativity, and they don't feel understood. And I think that's pretty relatable in a sense in which they just want to goof around, they just want to have fun, something like akin to recess, in which the kids, they have the most fun playing recess, but when they're in the classroom they're incredibly miserable and they can't express their creative freedom. I kind of feel it's somewhat similar to that, except it's like I said, really out there. So one of the things that they really do love is their creation of their comic book character, Captain Underpants. And then afterwards, they try to do like this, tampering with an invention, and it just, turns out to, go completely wrong. And then they decide that, they were going to pull this as like their ultimate prank. And then the principal was like, he had enough. He was like so frustrated with them because they pulled off so many pranks. And so they decided, you know what?
But the one thing that was, the one thing that kept that going, because this is a thing that happened like over 4 years. All these pranks that have been going on in the school. So,
exactly,
but the problem is that the Principal Crub didn't have the evidence to say that it was them. That's the only thing, but he only had a suspicion of it, so that's the only way he could, constantly keep going on about it, as his narrative. But then when it comes to the invention fair, obviously that's when the turtle comes in, films them both, and then obviously that's where Melvin is obviously introduced as kind of I don't know really about Melvin. Like he's obviously like a lackey to the main villain, which we'll get to later on. But it's kind of unusual that the lackey of the villain gets introduced before the actual villain. I know, because usually,
he kind of reminds me a little bit of Randall from Recess, in which he's kind of like the lackey to Miss Finster.
Yeah, but it's like in, if let's say, for example, we compare this to Recess Schools Out, where we got introduced to, we got introduced to the, the former principal, the main villain of that, before we got introduced to basically all his, his scientists and all his people like that, and everything else in that. If everyone's ever followed Recess Schools Out, sorry if you're like puritist, DreamWorks fans, but in regards to Melvin being the first person we see and the first person we interact with, that's a new one for me. Like I can't see that. I can't remember another. I mean, at least I can't remember right now on the top of my head. I'm sure someone in the comments is going to remind me. But has there ever been another movie or maybe even another television show where we get introduced to the lackey first before we actually get introduced to the main villain?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that maybe it should have been kind of like the other way around, in which maybe like Principal Krupp was one of the judges at the science fair, and then he sees what's maybe like what's going on, and then all of a sudden then we get introduced to Melvin, which, by the way, Melvin, what a really original name for a nerdy character. Am I right?
Melvin.
Anyway, so yeah.
Oh my god, I just remembered now. It reminds me of the parody of Alvin and the Chipmunks in The Simpsons is Melvin and the Squirrels. It's like Melvin.
Melvin. Yeah. And that's the name that they gave to Umino in the Deke dub of Sailor Moon. So there you go. Another nerdy reference. But yeah, then eventually, that's when Mr. Krupp does figure out that it was Harold and George who have been pulling off these pranks for many years, and then he decides, you know what? I've had enough with you guys, with you pulling off these pranks for all these years. We're going to have you in separate classrooms.
Yeah. There's one scene, though, in that montage. I mean, sorry to go a couple of minutes back, but I remember there being a montage where they're showing, like, all the evil things that Principal Krupp does. And, there's, like, cutting all the, extracurricular activities and, doing all these oppressive things. But then there's like one where I know it was a joke. Like he doesn't know he's actually did it or not. But there's one where he's got a flamethrower and he's actually burning a kitten alive in that. And that gave me some uncomfortable vibes because I don't expect everyone to remember this, but have you ever heard of the meme MEDM? Not even
No.
Doom music. Yeah, there was a really horrible video that was shown of some guy actually burning a cat in a cage to death. And they basically put Doom music over the top of it, which was disgusting and it was terrible, and they took it all off. It basically got taken offline, and I think the guy got, arrested and charged for it and stuff. And in regards to, it just kind of reminded me of that, and that came across a bit, were they nudging at that, or were they saying, I really hope they weren't referencing that. I'm sure they weren't.
So.
No, I hope
it was
not,
just like a quick joke.
Yeah, I felt it was, the fact that they even put censor bars over the top of it, I really hope they weren't, at least in my version, which I watched, they put censor bars over the top. I don't know whether that actually turned out in the, I don't know, I mean, sorry to go back to Boss Baby, but the Boss Baby version that you sent, did they censor out the Boss Baby's genitalia? In your version? Yeah, they did. Okay, then that's fine. But, it was just, I just noticed that, there's been quite a lot of, at least in the recent movies, there's been kind of a lot of, like, censoring of stuff, kind of, like, lazily. And that's one thing I've noticed in, like, the later DreamWorks films. And I don't know if it's because, they've just had to put it in, like, last minute, or is because it was, like, an intentional joke. I'm not too sure. But, it doesn't really come across as all that clever. It just comes across as a bit sloppy, really. Mm-hmm. But that's just me. We go back to he's going to move them into separate classes. So there's kind of over dramatization of it, including like one version with sock puppets in it, which I thought, I know they're trying to like go outside the 3D, and that's one thing I like about this movie. It tries its best to go outside the 3D, obviously being a 3D animation. There's animated segments in it. There's obviously live action segments in it as well, which I thought were kind of
exactly.
cool.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Chowder or Gumball, where it kind of like plays around with its different style of animation.
Mm-hmm. And it's mind you, didn't whatchamacallit, what's it, Courage the Cowardly Dog? That kind of did it as well.
I think they did. I think that sometimes it also goes into like this live action stuff or CGI for the monsters.
Yeah, it does. And so, mind you, there's going to be people like saying, "Whoa, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show had Captain Lou Albano." It's like, well, yeah, but that wasn't done to like that was a separate segments. They weren't to
exactly.
the effect. So, we get that whole thing, and then they come up with the idea of destroying the evidence. And so that's when they end up sneaking back into the principal's office to go find that turtle to either, capture it or, mind you, like, they felt sorry for it at one point. And obviously because it's strapped to his ankle, whilst Principal Crook's been in the shower, which I thought, creepy. But, so then they go through, like, all the stuff they got confiscated from them, and then they find the hypno ring. And
and they decided at first that they were going to use the hypno ring so that Mr. Krupp would forget that they were involved with the pranks, but then they were like, no, he kind of looks like Captain Underpants. Yeah. So let's make him Captain Underpants.
Here's the thing about this, though, is like, I know it's animation, and I know, like, I don't know if it felt a bit out of place for that. I don't think we were kind of ready to kind of accept that yet. And yet it just kind of happened. It's like, how did the hypno ring do what it did? Like, they did this over dramatization of like being from China and stuff like that, but I just felt like, it didn't feel like all that believable, really. I didn't feel like it took me out of the moment. All that, which is kind of like, it felt like, was there any evidence of the hypno ring before it was actually introduced? Like, as a solution? No, it just came out of nowhere, basically. So it's, I think that kind of goes against it really a little bit. It's like they just came out of nowhere.
Maybe they could have like introduced the hypno ring like earlier into the film, and then Mr. Krupp confiscated it, and then they, maybe they thought, hey, or maybe like in a quick little flashback, we could have seen something like that.
Maybe they did, and they just got it for time. I don't know.
Maybe it's been a while since I've read the book.
Yeah. So obviously, Principal Club now becomes Captain Underpants, which is quite a hilarious transformation, and then obviously they realize that they're stuck with Captain Underpants, who is trying to be a superhero, and he's quite a dumb one at that. Which, I guess that kind of baffled me before the final third of the movie, which is that, he turned into Captain Underpants, but there's no, you can understand why he turned into a chicken, you can understand why he turned into a monkey, because obviously he's probably seen chickens and monkeys before, but, in regards to Captain Underpants, it kind of threw me, because it's like, how did he know to basically be an act like Captain Underpants? But then we realize at the very end of the film, he's actually been reading the comic books. So I guess that's the explanation for it, maybe?
I think so. I mean, I think that when it comes to like hypnotizing, I think that, one of the first things that's in your mind, you have it there. Or if you're told by the hypnotist about like you're going to be thinking about this thing or you're going to do this thing, then that's when it's done. So I guess since the last thing that he read was comic books, I guess that was like one of the first things in his mind.
Yeah, so I just think, I mean, it would make sense if like he became Captain Underpants and had like a kind of a brief idea of like who he was, but didn't really understand anything else about his character, and then eventually, Harold and George would introduce him to the comic books, and he said, hey, this is who you are, and then eventually he starts to realize that he is this hero, and then obviously takes it too much seriously than he should do, and that would make sense. But obviously we get to that bit, and then we get to I'm trying to remember where we are now. Obviously then he goes and stops some bank robbers, hilariously by riding on an inflatable gorilla, and but then he did, before he can take any of the credit for it, obviously Harold and George get him away, and then randomly though in a side segment we're introduced to our villain.
Yeah, Professor Poopypants.
Professor Poopypants, yeah. And, obviously his introduction is quite is cartoony hilarious. And then, obviously Captain Underpants, not knowing any better, obviously hires him for the job for science teacher. And, but it just felt kind of like out of nowhere. He kind of just walked into frame, really, of like saying, oh, hey, here's a thing for a science teacher. And I guess I'm going to be getting that job, I guess. So
yeah, and isn't that another thing about like scientists would be the villain of a comic book?
Well, yeah, that's a Marvel. That's a Stan Lee thing. Like Stan Lee said, like in that interview with Michael Moore, he said like, well, they had to be scientists because how on earth else did they come up with this stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a nice nod to Marvel, I guess, and for to say, oh hey, this villain needs to be a scientist in order to do that, and so. He gets hired as the science teacher, and he uses that as his cover to obviously work on his experiment of getting rid of the world, of getting laughter out of the world. And he uses Melvin because Melvin is one of the people who doesn't have like that part of his brain that can create any humor. So he's
and the gland is like really hard to pronounce, like haha guffa chuckle la wumus or something like that.
Something like that. I was kind of creeped out about it because like he was talking about getting rid of it, and I realized the other part of the purple bit is kind of like the part of the brain that attaches to the spinal cord. So basically he was going to kill him eventually, and I was like, okay. Like, cause that kind of, that kind of, is like, oh wow, that's pretty dark for where we are at the moment. So, if you sever someone's brain from their spinal cord, they're dead. I thought like, that's his plan. Like, I
mean, like they kind of like turned into like zombies in a kind of weird sense. So maybe he did kill them.
They did, but no, they didn't die. I mean, obviously they turned back to normal.
Not like dead, but like it's emotional dead. Okay. Like that kind of dead.
Right. So then they realize the horrible mistake that Harold and George have made, obviously getting Captain Underpants to, because this is the thing, like you can't blame Professor P for where he ended up, because obviously Harold and George turned Principal Krupp into Captain Underpants, and he ended up making these horrible decisions, and then obviously all the craziness that, because they basically brought it on themselves.
Yeah, pretty much.
In this move. And I don't know, like, I feel a bit hypocritical by not criticizing this, because I've obviously dealt with protagonists who ended up creating their own messes, but then ended up having to solve them in the first place. And it kind of makes me feel like, well, do I level the same criticism here of our supposedly heroes here? To say that, none of this would have happened if, you guys hadn't done this, that, and the other. And then this whole, situation, ended up because of what you guys did. I don't know. Like, I mean, I leave it up to everybody else to say whether that's actually, right, whether that was right for me to criticize that or not. I don't know. So, in regards to, so basically we get to this point, and with I mean, I'm trying to think of all the things I could probably say about this. I mean, what do you
Well, I
think?
mean,
What do you think
there
of
was
the
a scene in
romance
which they
between?
were captured and they were really close into becoming like the zombies, and they kind of like reflect on everything that they've been through, and that's when they kind of like show their true friendship and the true core of their laughter. That way, they can be able to defeat the villain.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was a really nice moment.
What do you think of the relationship between Captain Underpants, well, Mr. Krupp and Edith? You know, the love interest in this movie. Because that was obviously there in the side.
Yeah, it was kind of there for sure, but I don't think I really remember it as much as like Harold and George's.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's there at the end of the movie, pretty much.
Yeah, it's
but,
there,
and-
but it wasn't like emphasized enough.
Yeah. And so, obviously, there's that also going on the side. And obviously, our main whole thing here is obviously Professor Poopypants. And I can't believe I'm actually saying that. But so between that and, mind you, when Poopypants is announced, I felt like, I don't know, I didn't really like the way it was kind of like brought to the forefront. I would have really liked it if it was kind of more like, both Harold and George, instead of like making like a whole song number about it, it's basically saying, maybe having like a massive, having a massive like, laughing fit about it, kind of like laughing along with the audience that we've basically just discovered this, rather than basically kind of like, it just comes across as a little bit obnoxious. Mm-hmm. Really, when that comes across, I would rather basically just kind of like because at the end of the day, they're breaking the fourth wall throughout this movie, and it would kind of be more relatable, I think, if they didn't do that and they kind of like just kind of talked with the audience rather than kind of like sang to them in a way. That's just me as a pretty weak criticism, but that's just how I would necessarily
I mean, I think
really.
it does fit with the movie though, because it was incredibly wacky up to that point.
Yeah, I guess. So we get to the point where Professor Poopypants is about to obviously launch his weapon pretty much with a giant toilet. And
yes.
So, which I just think is, here we are. And so he ends up doing this, and then obviously we get reintroduced to Captain Underpants after, we go through this sad scene, but I just think it's, I don't know, like, we know they're going to end up back together again pretty much at the end of this. So it didn't feel like all that impactful. When Mr. Krupp, obviously gets rained upon, and obviously they can't snap to get him back into Captain Underpants, and then they just also said they're going to be in separate classes. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like, it just didn't feel like all that impactful. It's like, yeah, that's happening now, but all the scenes that came in between that just kind of felt like, I just felt they overplayed it too much, really, and we knew they were going to be back in, I thought. So then obviously the plan happens with Professor P and obviously Melvin being the person who's going to be dragged into it, and so we get that, and Captain Underpants ends up turning back from Principal Krupp and tries to save the day, but obviously not without Harold and George to help out what's going on. And so a lot of more chaos ensues, and the school ends up being put on its side, really. And,
exactly. Everything is fine, but everything is destroyed.
Everything is
just
destroyed.
like a Marvel superhero, or any superhero movie, for that matter.
The one thing I just don't like about it, and this is another weak criticism, and I totally accept that. I just think that the title move of this movie is Captain Underpants, and yet Captain Underpants is somewhat a bit of a side note, really, when you really think about it. He's
well, to be fair, I mean, this was his introduction, and he would get more focus on in later books.
Yeah, and so I guess if they do later movies, I guess he's going to be the focus of it. I guess maybe. So Harold and George and Harold decide instead to destroy the hypno ring and obviously put an end to the whole thing. And so Mr. Krupp returns to normal. And but then they decide to pull one last prank, and that's put Mr. Krupp and Edith together for the date. And then we think all is going to be well, but then we realize that the toilet that was collected by the sanitation department is leaking out its power fluid, and now is going to be affecting other toilets. So then we obviously get this army of toilets, and we think this is going to be. Here's the thing about this. So this happens, and we think this is going to be the end of the movie. And then, obviously, the peril starts happening, and then Mr. Crab clicks his fingers and magically turns back into Captain Underpants. So he must have retained his ability to do that after destroying the hypno ring. And so, but mind you, like, I just felt a bit... Here's literally the end of the movie. So he's flying with George and Harold at the end of his cape. He flies through the toilets, at least through some of them. He flies up into the air, into the moon, and basically just yells "tra-la-la" one time, and that's the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. And I gotta be honest with you, I felt kind of gypped at that. Like, what, you couldn't fit in another epic fight scene before we end the show? Like, it's like, come on, guys, I paid $10 for this. Like, you couldn't fit in one more kind of like epic scene before, obviously, we wrap things up.
Maybe they wanted to, like, go over to, the next film, this is how we're going to end it. We're going to end it off with, like, a bit of a cliffhanger. That way you could wait for the sequel. Okay, well, maybe. I don't know. But, I mean... There are plenty of books based off of Captain Underpants. So I guess they wanted to leave it off of that.
Yeah. But, so this movie did... Well, mind you, keep this in mind. This movie only did $104 million at the box office. So,
yeah, it didn't make a lot of money. And we've talked about, like, movies that were, like, box office failures throughout, the past few weeks of DreamMachine. And, yeah, this one had a much smaller budget. The amount of money that Captain Underpants made in the box office is, like, the amount of money that they would have as an average budget for one of their films.
Yeah, well, mind you, it's only $38 million to make. So I think it's going to be up to them whether they think this is going to be worth bringing up again. And, I don't know. I just feel like this is going to be kind of like... this is why you should never name movies the first movie. Like, if anything, you should just name it Captain Underpants and just hope for the best. And if it does money, then great, do Captain Underpants 2. But, the fact that they call Captain Underpants the first epic movie, I've got to be honest with everybody, with the amount of money that it did, I kind of thinking this is probably going to be the only movie. To be honest. So, it is a sad end probably to, who knows, maybe they might have another go trying to bring it back. And just like with pretty much every single DreamWorks film, because of course, they do have an animated series based off of Captain Underpants on Netflix. Yeah. Do you think that's going to be part of the course now? Do you think every time they're going to bring out a property, it's going to have a TV series on Netflix?
There have been a few exceptions, but pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So, by the way, we've wrapped up Captain Underpants, but we just want to let you guys know we are still accepting ratings for the upcoming top 5 and top 5 best and top 5 worst DreamWorks animated films for the final episode of the series. So, if you guys just click the link in the description below if you want to rate up the films, and so you guys are gonna have a massive contribution to that to maybe get some tiebreakers out of the way. Because let me tell you something, that I think we've already got an idea of what our top 5 best and top 5 worst are going to be at this point, I think. And so I think you guys are going to probably be very defining factors in where these things end up. So if you guys can do that for us, that'd be really awesome. And and then at the very end of it all, we'll let you know what the results are. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're really looking forward to seeing what you guys pick as the 5 best and 5 worst. And I know there's going to be some people out there who are going to be saying, like, what? This movie was the worst? No, I like it. It's like, please, vote.
Vote. And that's how you make a difference. You vote. So, by the way, just to alleviate any confusion about this, the voting isn't for every film, is not mandatory. If there's a film in there you haven't seen, then you don't have to. You can leave it blank. You don't have to vote for it. So, just rate all the films that you've seen.
And please do it quickly because we have one more film to talk about, and then afterwards we're gonna go straight into the list anyway. So.
Yeah. So, followed by this, I guess the second to last episode, and I tell you what, we will include a bonus episode if we get time for it, but we're going to let you know about what that's going to be. Mind you, we have dropped some hints throughout the series about what it's actually going to be, so if you want to, obviously you can hear about that if you listen to the other episodes of DreamMachine. So if you before then, we are going to be doing How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World as our next episode. So,
Yeah, the most recent of the How to Train Your Dragon films, as well as the most recent DreamWorks film, that is until Abominable comes out this September.
Yeah. Do we say probably the most anticipated third movie? When you say
Yeah, I mean, I remember a lot of people really excited for it. I think that when we did announce DreamMachine for the first time, people were really anticipating our thoughts for the third film.
By the way, I'm trying my best also on the rating system now. I can see some of the results coming in, and so I'm actually keeping a blind eye on How to Train Your Dragon: Hidden World. So if you want to ask even people who are in the know of this, I'm basically saying, oh, what's going on with How to Train Your Dragon: Hidden World? I'm not saying a thing because I'm not seeing the ratings until obviously I see it myself. So cool. So for another episode of Dream Machine, my name is Aaron.
And my name is Patricia.
And take care, and bye for now.
See you later.